Kia ora koutou katoa, good afternoon. Today I'm joined by Finance Minister Grant Robertson and Energy Minister Megan Woods. As I stand before you, we are in the midst of a global energy crisis. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has unleashed a global energy shock and a spike in prices at the pump felt by the whole world. Last week, prices for all three fuel types rose by the highest amount on record. 91 increased by 6% in a week, and prices have increased by 13% over the past month. The impact of the war sits on top of the pain already caused by the pandemic, with global supply chain disruption and increases in consumer demand causing high levels of inflation in many countries, including right here in New Zealand. We are in a wicked, perfect storm, and it's a storm that's impacting people's lives. We've said many times that forecasters predict that things will improve, and when it comes to inflation, that remains the case. Like our current Omicron outbreak, the current economic circumstances are expected to peak and subside over the coming year. But when it comes to the specific issue of the impact the war in Ukraine is having on fuel costs, we expect continued volatility. And this affects everything, from the ability of people to get to and from work, to the costs of supplying goods and services. And so, just as it was our job to get New Zealand through the health crisis of COVID, it's our job to get them through this energy crisis too. There is no silver bullet, but we have a plan where every part will make a difference. Since day one of taking office, Labour has reduced cost pressures on New Zealand families. Policies like family tax credit, free school lunches, reducing doctors' fees for children, and school donations being removed have all been about ensuring families have more in their pocket to get ahead. But what we're experiencing now warrants a specific response. And so today I want to set out further steps in our plan to help support Kiwis through this wicked, perfect storm. First up, on April 1, a suite of measures will take effect that will see significant increases in the take-home incomes of the majority of Kiwi families. 346,000 families, almost 60% of all New Zealand families, will see their incomes lift by an average of $20 a week. Those on superannuation will see their incomes lift by $52 a fortnight for a single person and $80 for a couple. In addition, a full-time minimum wage worker will see their pay lift by $48 a week. As well, childcare assistant income thresholds will also be adjusted on the 1st of April. And then on May 1, the winter energy payment will kick in for over 1 million New Zealanders, with families receiving over $30 a week, a total of $700 extra over the winter months. In addition, over the course of the last week, the government has been developing additional policy aimed at offering immediate relief to help Kiwis through the current peak in petrol prices. Our primary focus is on how we can give Kiwis in the long term options that mean they have more energy security, that we aren't at the whim of global energy prices. Our policy is to expand public transport links, to make it more affordable to own a fuel-efficient, hybrid or electric vehicle, and making public transport cheaper for low-income families are well underway. This must continue. And I'm signalling today that you will see in the budget in May greater investment in this area through the Climate Emergency Response Fund. Now, more than ever, is the time to make our transition towards more sustainable transport options and greater energy security. But this is not a transition we can make in a week or a month. As we've seen with the most recent jump in prices at the pump over the weekend, the situation has quickly become acute and extra short-term measures are needed. On that basis, Cabinet has decided today to do what we can to alleviate the increases at the pump by reducing the fuel excise duty by 25 cents a litre and the road user charges by the same amount for a period of 3 months. This means a potential saving of between $11.50 and $17.25 per tank of fuel. Cabinet has made the decision that, in addition, all public transport fares will be half price for the next 3 months. We hope this ensures that where the option of shifting how we travel is available, this makes it more affordable to take that public transport option up. We cannot control the war. and we expect continued volatility in fuel prices. But we can take a range of steps to reduce the impact on New Zealand families, and we are. I'll now hand to Deputy Prime Minister Robertson to provide the details, followed by Minister Woods, who will talk about our engagement with the fuel companies on this issue to ensure that reduction is passed on to consumers. Minister Robertson.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As the Prime Minister has said, Cabinet today decided to support New Zealanders through this global energy shock by reducing the fuel excise duty and road user charges by 25 cents and halving public transport fares for the next 3 months. I'll work through each of these decisions. Firstly, the reduction of the fuel excise duty. This will come into force via an order in Council from 11:59 p.m. tonight. Minister Woods will speak shortly on her conversations with fuel companies in terms of that benefit being passed on to consumers. We've decided to make this change for an initial 3-month period with a review before the end of that. New Zealand, like many other countries, is reliant on the global oil price when it comes to the prices that New Zealanders pay at the pump. We have seen dramatic increases over the course of the last few months, and as the Prime Minister said, even more so in the last few weeks. The price of crude oil has increased by 38% since the beginning of the year, coming on the back of significant increases in the last 3 months of last year. We cannot influence the global oil price, and so therefore, if we want to relieve some pain at the pump, we need to look at the things that we can control. Reducing fuel excise is the quickest and most efficient way of using a tax system tool to make a contribution and address the impact on New Zealanders of this global energy shock. It means that we can take this action within hours rather than the months it typically takes to make changes to other aspects of the tax system, such as GST. As Prime Minister said, the advice that we have received is that the decrease we're announcing today will save New Zealanders $17.25 every time they fill a 60-litre tank, or $11.50 every time they fill a 40-litre tank. We do need to recognise that petrol prices are expected to continue to rise. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is continuing to undermine and destabilise global energy markets, and added to the other inflationary pressures the world is facing due to the COVID supply chain disruptions, this is sadly not over yet. That is why we will review the situation over the coming months. We will also outline in the coming days the means by which we will reverse this change. It is likely that this will be a gradual phase down in line with global oil prices stabilising and reducing. On road user charges, it is a more complex picture, and therefore it will take longer to implement. I can assure those users that they will still get 3 months' worth of benefit from when we are able to make changes. The two reasons it will take longer to implement are that there are over 80 different vehicle types and over 100 rates of road user charges. Reduced rates will need to be calculated, and transport officials will move as quickly as possible, but it is not an instantaneous process. Secondly, Section 85 of the Road User Charges Act states that any rate change only comes into force 42 days or 6 weeks after being notified in the Gazette. This was clearly put in place for increases, but we still need to deal with the fact that that is in our legislation. We will make decisions in the coming days on the process for dealing with these matters, in particular if we can use the existing statutory framework or whether we need to change it. To reiterate, the time difference between rate changes will not mean road users with vehicles subject to road user charges will be disadvantaged. No disadvantage will result because the 3-month period will apply from whenever the order comes into effect. Thirdly, we decided today to halve public transport fares for 3 months. I'm advised that this is likely to come into force from the 1st of April. Cheaper public transport fares can directly reduce transport costs for households who are encouraged to substitute their current car travel for public transport that is readily accessible, and for households who currently use public transport. Reducing public transport fares also provides households with more money to manage rising living costs, which will be impacted by fuel prices. In practice, local authorities set public transport fares and will be reimbursed to compensate for lost fare revenue. We are unable to directly set fare reductions, but I'm confident the local councils will welcome this change and will implement it speedily. As the Prime Minister has stated, supporting public transport and mode shift will be an important part of the work we do to reduce emissions, and it will feature in Budget 2022. Therefore, I think it is appropriate to take this step for 3 months, which takes us up to the beginning of the new financial year covered by that budget. And finally, to come to the question of costs, as I have noted a number of times, the fuel excise duty is a fully hypothecated charge. Fuel excise goes directly into the National Land Transport Fund that pays for roads, public transport and walking and cycling infrastructure all around New Zealand. That fund is always well oversubscribed as we attempt to meet the transport needs across New Zealand following decades of underinvestment. We cannot afford to delay that work while taking this pressure off households. Therefore, I have committed to topping up the National Land Transport Fund for the expected loss of revenue from the reduction in excise. Treasury and the Ministry of Transport have estimated the cost of the change for Fed and RUC to be $350 million for this 3-month period. We will be meeting the costs of this through savings and reprioritisation from the COVID Response and Recovery Fund, in particular the reduction in costs related to MIQ. The cost of the public transport fare subsidy is estimated to be between $25 and $40 million. This too will be met from savings and reprioritisation from the COVID Fund. I would add that as it is a reprioritisation from this existing fund, it is already factored into the budget forecast, so we can make this commitment without increasing government debt. As the Prime Minister has said, this situation highlights the importance of two things. Firstly, our move to energy security and independence by moving away from volatile global oil markets, by decarbonising our vehicle fleet and supporting public transport, cycling and walking, and we will deal with this more in the budget. The reasons for us need to do so as a country have never been more stark. Secondly, this highlights the importance of support for those most affected by the cost of living increases. And as the Prime Minister has outlined, there is a suite of measures coming in to support low and middle income households on the 1st of April and then again on the 1st of May. But for now, we are moving as swiftly as possible to reduce the pain at the pump and support the users of public transport. I'll now hand over to Minister Woods to discuss the conversations and expectations we've been having with the fuel industry.
Thank you, Minister Robertson. This afternoon I've been speaking with fuel company CEs who are welcoming this move to ease pressure on consumers at the pump. Most fuel companies are indicating that they're ready to reduce the price of petrol from midnight tonight. Of course, the government wants clear evidence that the 25 cent a litre reduction in fuel excise duty is passed on to consumers and not absorbed into fuel company profits. To this end, I'm writing to all of the companies this afternoon, outlining our expectation that the full amount of the excise duty relief is passed on to consumers at the pump. In addition, I'm seeking daily information disclosure from fuel companies on their rolling 7-day average fuel margins to monitor industry profits. I intend for this information to be publicly available. Our preference is that the fuel companies